started here. Let's start with a word of prayer, and we'll go through what I've got for you here. Father, thank you for Jesus Christ and the salvation we have through him. And it's a privilege to be able to share what he has done around the world, and I thank you for the churches that we have represented this week and their love and passion for missions and sending out missionaries. And we just pray your blessings upon each church. We just look forward to many, many souls around the world being saved because of the efforts and opportunities that we have. We ask that you bless this time this morning, and we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. All right, so I've got some information I'm going to be sharing with you, but at the end I do have a handout that has pretty much all of this for you, okay? So you can write some of it down as you want to, but you know how it is sometimes when you get the handout, people start reading that and all that. They kind of go way ahead of you in pages, and so I'm just going to wait till the end. So it's all good information you'll have. There'll be even more information in there because, 30 minutes or so, it's hard to cover everything. So I've put a lot of good material for you to take home with you that you can also use and glean from. So my subject is every church can be a sending church. I know some of you in here are sending churches, and so that's a great thing. Maybe there's some things you can add to this. I mentioned on Monday night that it was Bill Monroe that I first heard say 20-some years ago that every church should be a sending church. And I think that's good. I think it's right. It is the church that God uses in the Great Commission. That's who he gave the Great Commission to. Didn't give it to the mission office. We're not the sending agency. The church is the sending agency.
That's right.
So we want to make sure to keep that right. But also, we come alongside and help the sending church. And we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. Just with the BBFI, we have around 2,400 churches in the U.S. that still affiliate with the BBFI. We process support for over 4,000 churches, but 2,400 say, yes, we are affiliated with. But out of those 2,400, do you have any idea how many are sending churches?
100?
Well, a little more than that.
Okay, good.
Yeah. 248.
Good. Praise the Lord.
So just about 10% are sending churches. Now, some of them send multiple missionaries. Okay, and then there's others that not necessarily people who are homegrown and they're sending, but like Springfield, if they come to college, then a lot of times they'll get connected into a local church here, and that church may become their sending church instead of their home church. So those things kind of give the dynamics that I'm going to share with you here. But as of the other day, 23 churches send 4 or more missionaries. So 23 of those 248. Cherry Street is a sending church for 18 missionaries. I think High Street's probably got the most. They're in the 20s, 23, 24 sending church that I'm aware of. 16 churches send 3 or more missionaries. So they're the sending church for 3 or more. And then 49 churches, 2 missionaries. And then 160 churches are the sending church for 1 missionary. Okay? So that's kind of the breakdown that we see. So the idea is to think about, as a pastor in a church, to move from being a missions-minded church, which is great, to being a missions-sending church. And that's the idea that we'd like to see. So if you want to look at Acts chapter 13, that gives us a model that Jesus set up for missions. And I'll just read the first 3 verses. And of course, as you know, we could do multiple sermons just on these 3 verses. Multiple sermons on each verse of these first 3. But we'll just look at them real briefly here. It says, now there were in the church that was at Antioch certain prophets and teachers, as Barnabas and Simeon, that was called Niger, and Lucius of Cyrene, and Manaen, which had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch, and Saul. As they ministered to the Lord and fasted, the Holy Ghost said, Separate me, Barnabas and Saul, for the work, whereunto I have called them. And when they had fasted and prayed and laid their hands on them, they sent them away. So it's a clear illustration or idea of the model that Jesus has set up for the church. Now, one of the things I find interesting is that God's using the church in Antioch. Why not the church in Jerusalem? And I think we all know Jerusalem, they were kind of more focused in on their own selves and really didn't think about going to the Gentiles, which is kind of a warning, I think, for churches today, right? We need to be also looking out. Amen. And so God chose the church in Antioch to become the missions and evangelistic center that started all of this. So he set up the church to be the sending agency. Then if you look at Matthew 28, we're not going to look there, but if you think about those verses 18 through 20, Jesus says to go ye therefore. Now, we are to pray and we are to give, but that verse doesn't say pray ye therefore or give ye therefore. It's go. And so, given that is for the church, I believe that the church needs to think about going itself. I believe that every church should wrestle with the idea, are we just going to be a supporting church where we're supporting others that are sent, or are we going to also become a sending church? A sending church is a church reproducing itself on the mission field. And I believe everything needs to reproduce after its own kind, right? So a church should reproduce a church. We teach that on the mission field, and we see that happening on the mission field. I'm excited about things that are happening on the mission field because so many missionaries have taught their churches to reproduce. And so today we have well over 21,000 churches outside of the United States.
Amen.
That have been started. And that's just directly related to our missionaries. You can look at, there's others that nationals since have started and gone on. And so it's much more even.
Are you saying things you don't want people to hear?
Yes.
Locking people out?
Yes. Yeah. No, just one person we're locking out.
It didn't work.
I know, he's got the key.
We heard you coming. Yeah, there it goes.
Yes.
There it goes.
Yes. And so when you're part of the Great Commission and your church understands that, and you're giving and you're sending and you're praying, but when you do send, it comes to the point where it's almost like you're really taking ownership of the Great Commission.
Right.
Now you're really taking it completely as it's designed. But also, what it does is it gets your people to be more involved in praying and giving because now it's one of their own. And so it's more of an ownership of the Great Commission. So the question I would have, and maybe you can help me with some of this, is what are some of the obstacles that you see in churches becoming a sending church? What are some of, yes?
I think that, like, if you're not doing evangelism and discipleship in your own church, you're not going to have the fuel that you need or the people that you need to then send somebody to do what you're not doing.
Exactly.
So you got to be strong at home to have a culture that gets sent out.
Yeah, you're right. And discipleship is the key thing because I think as more people are discipled, they're going to understand what it takes and what is needed and have more of an interest in sending that around the world, doing the same thing. So yes, that's one thing.
And they can't be discipled if they're not saved.
Exactly.
So you got to do evangelism.
Yes. And they can't be saved if you're not going out and giving, right?
Exactly.
So it's all part of the process. And otherwise it's the great omission. Because you're not really going out there and getting them, bringing them in, discipling, and then able to send them. It's not the Great Commission. So that's good. What else?
I've seen a lot of fear on the part of the parents for young people.
Yes.
I've seen a lot of kids surrender from ministry, and parents talk them out of it.
Yeah. Oh yes, very much so.
A lot of them.
I talk about that when I'm speaking in churches, you know, how when we were parents and our little baby was born and we go before the church and dedicate them. But then when it's time for them, God calling them, no, don't go.
Yeah.
And so I've always, hey, parents, send your kids, let them go if God's calling. And now I'm practicing what I preach. My daughter just left 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And they're on the mission field. So, yes, parents can be an issue. How about churches maybe think they're too small
Yeah.
to support?
Mm.
Bring someone in and train them and send them, how can we handle that? Or not enough money. We don't have enough money. Some might say, just don't know how to do it. How do we go through the process? So I'm going to share a couple of those things with you here this morning. So
Do you think sometimes also that people I can't send them because I need them here?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yes. And especially if they're great staff members.
Right.
They're hard workers.
Right.
We hate to see them go.
Right.
That reminds me, this was some years ago, and I won't tell you who, but there was a pastor that came and said, I've got this staff guy, he's really not doing much, and they're not involved, and they're not doing what we want them to do, so I think we're going to send him to the mission. No, we don't want to. You keep them and keep training them, or let them go, whatever. But, yes, but yeah, it's true. It's hard when in fact, I've had a couple guys say, this 938 prayer is really hurting us.
Yeah.
Because we've had some of our best surrender to go.
Right.
We've been praying, and now they're leaving. And so it's hard. It's hard for your best to go. But it's also exciting because they're going to do a great work, and God will always replace. He'll bring someone else in.
Give and it shall be given.
Give and it shall be given.
That's right.
It's always worked as far as I've seen it, but it's good. So the first thing I have here in becoming a sending church, or even a stronger sending church, is create a missions culture. Creating a missions culture. And if you're looking at being a sending church, this is probably a 1 to 2 years before you even become training somebody. You've got to start creating that missions culture in your church, talking about it. So basically, casting a vision. You got to cast a vision. Church, we need to take ownership of the Great Commission and send one of our own. And so you start casting that vision and putting it out there before them. Do we really believe God can save and call and send someone from our church? As a pastor, if you don't, you're going to have a hard time getting your people to believe that. So you got to come to that point where you really understand and want to and desire to do that, and then you cast that vision. And so that can start with, talking about Matthew 9, 37 and 38. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest. So get your church into that mode of praying and thinking about it. I met some young missionary couples in China a number of years ago. And I said, so how did you get to be interested in being missionaries and come to China? And they said, it started back in our church. And years ago, our pastor got this burden for more missionaries to go, and began to pray, began to speak about it, talk about it, led his staff to catch the vision. They talked about it. They taught their Sunday school teachers so that in Sunday school classes, they talked about going, they talked about missions, every opportunity that they had. And then they had classes, even children's classes, do research on people groups. And then those classes would give reports on a Wednesday night in front of the church. We study this people group, and they don't even have a missionary. And as people start doing that, they start praying, and that's what these couples said. We were just in a young adults class, and we started praying. And God answered the prayer by sending us. So when I tell people the 938 prayer, or the 938 challenge is, God's going to answer one of two ways, if not both. He'll either send you or send someone else. And so be ready. But that's casting the vision. That's a great example of young people on the mission field because their pastor said, you know what, we've got to do more. And got the staff, the teachers, everybody in casting that vision. So make it audible, regularly spoken about, always mentioning it. And that happens in this church here at Cherry Street. Pastor Jennings is talking missions all the time. And, we've had quite a few missionaries be going out of this church. And it's because it's a vision that's been cast. Another idea is you could talk about, for example, in your church, talk about Cherry Street. Hey, Cherry Street is sending missionaries, and they're doing it. So as our church, we should consider doing those things. So use Mount Orab and Bible Baptists in Wilmington and others who are doing it as examples to encourage your church. Have an annual missions emphasis model. annually have a missions conference, or I would suggest doing it more manually, but at least do something once a year. But maybe in 6 months later, have a smaller conference as well, bring in some missionaries. But you're always casting that vision. Some churches do it Sunday through Wednesday or Sunday through Sunday. Others do it 4 Sundays out of the month, and they're casting that vision. And then you can do it through your missions giving. A lot of churches use faith promise missions giving, but there are other churches that use a combination of different things. And church the other day I was at, they do faith promise, but they also give 10% of their general on top of that. Because he says as a church we ought to be tithing just like we tell our people. So our church tithes 10% into their missions program, and they do even more. So just some ideas like that, but they're using that to promote missions and get their people excited about it. And so it creates an expectancy. You talk about the vision. We want to send someone. We want to send someone. Who's going to go from our church? And hopefully not the best on staff. But that's what you got to do, is cast the vision. Then the next thing is identifying and developing prospects. And so it's good to be watching who is God working in the lives of your young couples, young people, and then developing that. So you want to look for certain characteristics in people that God might be calling or want to use on the mission field for you to send. Here's some characteristics. Again, I've got the handout that all these are listed on, but they have to have a burden for the lost. You know, if they're not having that burden, or at least sharing their gospel with their testimony with others here in America, at home where it's a little more comfortable, they're probably not going to do it on the mission field if they go. And so you want to make sure they have a burden for the lost. Look for leadership ability in current ministries. Are they involved? Are they at least leading and helping in different ministries of the church? This is an important one. If they're married, a stable marriage. Stable marriage. As you all know, as missionaries, and some of the rest of us, and all of you, I'm sure, you know, if your marriage is not strong here, when you get to the mission field, Satan's going to attack it. One of the biggest areas that he attacks is the marriage of missionaries. And so look for a stable marriage. Teachable spirit, someone who's teachable. Growing in personal evangelism. Solid salvation experience. You know, sometimes we've gotten some applications from some people who are wanting to be a missionary, and I read their salvation experience, and I'm like, I'm not even sure if they really know if they're saved or not yet. You know? And so we make the phone calls, but I also call the sending pastor who's behind them, and you might want to make sure they understand what all this is about. So you want to see about that. They've been baptized. They're faithful in church attendance. That should be a given, but it's not always. Faithful volunteer, a soul winner. Highly respected by a large majority of the people in the church. You know, they've got that reputation, that testimony in the church that they're highly respected. Of course, meets the biblical requirements, especially if they're going as a church planter. They need to have the requirements of a pastor, the biblical requirements, and then some of the educational requirements that we see. And so what can you do to check out and find out some of these things in their lives? And some of that would be put them on a missions trip. You know, of course, involve them in your visitation program, but also send them on a missions trip. Most of the missionaries these days, when they give their testimonies of being at their approval time, they share it was on a mission trip that God really confirmed and finalized his call in my life. So a mission trip is a good opportunity. By the way, we are setting up more mission trips through the mission office that we will be leading. Cool. And so some churches might have 2 or 3 young people or one couple, but you can't set up a whole trip just for them. Well, you can put them together with some others from other churches that we're helping with.
Amen.
You know, some churches have big enough where they can send their own group all the way. But there's some that just have 1 or 2 or 3, and we can join them together. So stay tuned on all that. We can help you with that. Increase some ministry responsibilities. Give them some opportunities to teach in the children's program, or things like that. Personal mentoring by the pastor or staff. Take some time, talk with them, work with them, and then check their doctrinal background too, what they believe. That's important. And then another thing is financial preparation. Get down to the numbers of the finances. How can we afford? And that's one of the biggest things I see from churches. They say, I just don't know how to afford bringing someone on for a year to train them, to send them out as a missionary. And so this is one of the areas that causes the most churches to say, I can't do it. But I think if you are strategic in your planning and looking forward, in your planning, you can plan and prepare over a couple of years to then have somebody ready to be trained. And as I said earlier, there's some churches, they're homegrown, they've grown up in the church, but then there might be somebody that's been in Bible college, and now they're looking for an internship. And you could bring them in, and the finances will be a big part of that. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the cost, because I have that in the handout for you. But if you're looking at bringing someone in, it's probably going to be around $30,000 to $40,000 a year salary. Okay, so that's, wow, how can we hit that? How can we bring that in and get them? There's going to be health insurance, ministry expenses. You're looking at probably housing. I know some churches, they've taken some of their facility and made it into an apartment for an intern family to live there. And it's money up front, but then it's cheaper after that. So it's just going to take some kind of planning for that. But here's some ideas that you can do, especially if you're doing Faith Promise. You can encourage your church and say, okay, we want to have an intern in 2 years so that we as a church can be a sending church. So the next 2 years, we're going to try and increase our giving so that we can bring someone in. So this first year, we need 15 people, 15 couples to say, I'll give $25 extra. And you start planning, talking about that. Who's going to do that? And you start building that, and as more, don't give it all away into projects, but hold it and save it back so that you can bring that couple into the church. You're financially planning ahead to bring them in. And then the next year you can say, okay, we need 20 more people to increase their Faith Promise giving so that we can bring someone in. And after 2 years, you'll bring in enough funds that you can have somebody, you can pay their salary and take care of them, and then do the internship and send them out. So I give some details on that more specifically in my handout. Okay, so then you prepared, and you've got them, and you found someone you've homegrown or somebody that you want to bring in. Then you want to do that internship training. Now, especially with the BBFI, one of the few organizations that requires, but we do require an internship, at least 1 year. 2 years is good. In fact, we have found that if someone does 2 years of internship, they raise their support quicker than if they do 1 year. And I'm not sure exactly why, but that's kind of what's happened. And I think it's because they're a little more mature and ready, so when they go out into the churches, they present well. And churches can see, okay, they're ready, they've been prepared. So if they're going to be evangelizing and baptizing and church planting on the mission field, they need to know how to do it, right? Even the Apostle Paul, he was put into the church at Antioch. He knew how a synagogue worked, but the church was new.
Right.
And so he needed to be in a church, and that's where he was trained and prepared. His team was put together, and that's the church that sent him out. And so that's what we see here as well that we need to do. And have them involved in children's ministry for a while, have them involved in the youth ministry, have them involved in young adults and senior adults, have them involved in staff meetings and the deacons meetings, finance, planning, all those areas in that internship. Have them involved in those areas. Get them involved in door-to-door visitation and see how they do. Their personal testimony, work on their personal testimony. Gospel presentation, discipleship skills. Let them practice teaching and even preaching. Let them preach to the kids. That's a good place to start, isn't it? And so involve them in that. And then leadership development. Work with them on building teams, conflict resolution. Unfortunately, there's conflict between missionaries on the fields. And so conflict resolution. I teach a class in our training every year with our new missionaries, and it's interpersonal relationships, but I call it missionary shock. You know, we have culture shock. Well, sometimes there's missionary shock. You get on the field and it's surprising to see how things can develop and conflict comes up. How to resolve that. And so all those things. And then I'm going to share with you church readiness assessment. How do you know when you're ready to do an internship and bring someone in? And is your church ready for it? And so I even have on the back of the handout, there's a little score sheet. Where are you? And by your score, it'll show you then where you are in relation to bringing someone in. So because of time, I can't go through all that, but it'll be something that'll be helpful to you, okay? And then the last thing before I hand out the document and then let you go is one other thing that pastors say is it's just scary. How do we make sure that they're doing their finances correctly? How do we work with the IRS? How do they get their medical? How do we make all that happen for our church? Well, the answer is the mission office comes along and helps you. Okay? So we don't take your place, but we come alongside and help you with all those areas. So it can be scary, but we help with preparing them for deputation, for the field, for furloughs, medical coverage, how to set up a bank account on the field, and working with governments. So there's 5 key words here that are important to know as a pastor in a church, the relationship with the mission office. So the first word would be partnership. You're not alone. We're here to help you. As a pastor, you don't have really time to be thinking about all the IRS requirements and all the other things that it takes. We've been doing it for 75 years, and we've got it down pretty good, I think. Our missionaries would agree. We got it down pretty good, and so we can help you. We're a partnership with you. It's also a pathway to help you see your people from surrendering all the way to getting to the field. We help you every step of the way. One of the new things that we're coming out with, I wish we had it ready, but it's not. It's called Guide to Go. Guide to Go. It's a 9 video series, and each video is only 3 minutes. Okay, but it's like, how do I know God's calling me? Okay, so it's a 3-minute video with some resources that they can look up. And then a pastor can sit with somebody and say, let's watch this video on this. Or what education do I need? How do I know what service center to go with? Just all kinds of different things that helps them along the way that you or your staff can sit down with them. They can watch it themselves and then meet with you and then go through all the resources. So we're recording those short videos. We've already got the resources and everything. It's going to be really good and a good tool for you to use in your church. So the pathway. There's protection. Protection that we provide as far as with the IRS, making sure that everyone does everything correctly. And then there's provision, medical plan, emergency evacuation. We had a missionary a few years ago, a number of years ago now actually, but they were in Chile, Santiago, and they had a heart attack. And it was a very serious heart attack, and in that time, the hospital there said, we can't handle this situation. This is out of our scope. You got to get to America. Well, we were able to get a jet from Houston through our medical plan. From Houston, MD Anderson, with a doctor and a nurse, flew down to Santiago, Chile, brought them back, got them into MD Anderson at no extra cost to the missionary. Part of the medical plan, medical evacuation. We've had to do that a number of times around the world. So as a church, how would you know what to do? Or crisis action, maybe there's a natural disaster or kidnapping. Well, we're trained and we're ready. We have a team. We have backing with an organization that helps us with all those things. It's hard for churches to be able to handle all that, so we help with providing that. And then, of course, processing your funds, making sure the funds get to the mission field in all kinds of different ways. So that's what we do for you as a church. And then, of course, there's many things that we do for the missionaries. And again, this is in the handout, but we do pre-field training, end-of-month financial reports. Actually, every day, missionaries can get on their account and see where they are, what's been coming in. Worldwide medical coverage, security training, crisis action team, foreign bank and government assistance, creative access support, those that are in creative access places, We help with all that information, keeping them secret and, not so it's not out in the public. We have IT support, power of attorney. We're the power of attorney for missionaries. So if something happens while they're on the field with something back in the States, we can work with them and all that because we have the power of attorney. Ministry for missionary kids, missionary care, international retreats, media resources for our missionaries. So we do a lot for them. So as I close, the commission question would be this, that every pastor needs to answer. Is my church going to be a supporting church or a sending church? Supporting church is not bad or wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to really take ownership of the Great Commission,
Very simple.
you need to be a sending
Amen.
church. So I hope you'll make that commitment. All right, let me hand out these. Look at that, even color on them.
Wow.
Woo! This is big time high tech right here. All right, but if you look on the back has that little score assessment, and then there's information. Yeah. There you go. Want some more? Would you like two, or just one good enough? Okay. There you go. All right. So there you go. There's even a little extra. If you go back a few pages, there's even one that says sending church guidelines. Sending church guidelines, 4 or 5 pages back. Again, you are the authority of your missionary that you send, okay? We come alongside. These are just some guidelines, suggestions. We don't tell you what to do, but these are some things that can help you as a sending church. So there's several pages there. How do we affirm the call, early preparation, deputation, first term and beyond, furlough, all kinds of information. And then one of the things that I like to just mention that our church here does, Pastor Jennings and I went to a conference about sending churches, and they had the idea of sent teams. And so you have a sent team in your church. So it's a group of your members, and so since we have 18, we have, I think it's 7, and they have 2 missionaries. But that sent team is members of your church, and it's not a financial thing. They don't give more money or anything, but they read their prayer letters as a group. They pray for them. They write them. They call them. When they come back on furlough, they meet them at the airport. They're there just to encourage and be behind them. And so what's really neat is every year you can have your sent team meetings. You can do it quarterly. You can do it monthly. But every year, see if the people still want to do it again, or they might want to change to a different sent team with a different missionary, or new people come on and some people want to take a break, whatever it might be. But the sent team, so if you want more information on that, you can talk to me, but also talk to Pastor Jennings and how we do that here at this church. So, all right. Thank you very much for your time, and enjoy reading through some of this, gives you a little bit more information.